Good evening, everybody. Wave if you can hear me, please. I see smiles. I guess that means you can hear me. Thank you very much. Okay, good evening. It's nice to share the same virtual space as all of you this evening. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rabbi Foxbrenner, the assistant rabbi at Beth Jacob. And it's my privilege to be able to present this program to you tonight. This is the 10th of Teves Holocaust Education Program. I invite you all to mute yourselves for now. You can talk all the way at the end of the program. This is a program we started a few years ago. It's significant to note that tomorrow is the fast day of the 10th of Teves. And this is also the day, that's really the main hallmark of the day. In much more recent history, in 1955, the chief rabbinate of Israel published a document declaring today, meaning the Jewish day of the 10th of Teves, to be what they called the Yom HaKadish HaKlali, the general day of Kaddish, for almost an entire generation that had loved ones that they lost, and they didn't know what day that they perished. They didn't know when their yurtzeit was. They weren't able to pinpoint a day upon which they can say Kaddish and commemorate their memory. So a certain day was designated as a day of saying Kaddish, remembering those that we lost. And that's tonight, the Jewish day of the 10th of Teves. It's no mistake that they picked today, the 10th of Teves, which is a fast day, not tonight, but starting tomorrow morning, is a fast day for those who are able. And it's, interestingly enough, it is the only Jewish fast day, the only fast day that can fall on an Erev Shabbos, that can fall out on a Friday. That speaks a little bit to the stringency and to the meaning of the day. Most fast days don't fall out on a Friday because our sages didn't want us to enter into Shabbos, so hungry. But the 10th of Teves was one that is significant enough in meaning that it's important enough that it falls out specifically on that day, on the 10th, doesn't get pushed off, that it can even happen on a Friday. The 10th of Teves commemorates the beginning of the series of mournful events that culminated in the destruction of the Holy Temple of the Beis HaMikdash. And that is the most significant, sorrowful event that took place on that day. However, there's something else that in the slichos, in the liturgical poems that we recite at Shachris, there's something else that's mentioned. Another difficult, sorrowful event that happened. And that was that around this time, many, many years ago, the ancient Greeks forced the translation of the Torah, of the 5 books of Moshe. They confined 72 sages into separate quarters and forced them into interpreting the holy works of the Torah, which there's tremendous benefit in interpretation and in translation. But there's also a great tragedy that ensued, because once the pristine form of the Torah is shifted into another form or another language, it can be subject to misinterpretation. The depth of the Torah and its infinite spiritual angles are only really accessible in the original form. And perhaps, I suggest, that's a reason why today carries the significance of also, in more recent history, commemorating those who have been lost, a generation that has been lost, of the relatives who perished in the Holocaust, because it's very important. It is vitally important that we remember them and we commemorate them. And the best way we can possibly do that is to hear about it in the original, just like we mourn the loss of the original when it comes to the Torah. We also are mourn the loss of those that we lost, and we are so fortunate to be able to hear about it in the original, meaning from those who survived, who are alive and well, Admei Esther 120, and thriving, especially in our community. And that's what this event, this education event, is about. We've run this the past few years. It's been wonderfully successful and very, very meaningful to all of us. And it is with great privilege and great pleasure that we get to hear about the tales of a survivor of our community, Mr. Ben Hiller. And in this video, you're going to hear an overview of his story of survival and strength. It also features not only an incredible and providential story with God's guiding hand, but also it's interesting to note that Ben had a fine grasp on the broad world around him and how the reality of the events of the war fit into his personal timeline. So without further ado, with these brief words of introduction, we're going to display this video. Now, this video is readily accessible. It was produced by the Bremen Museum in 2013. What I'm going to be showing to you is the part of the video in which Ben really tells his story. It runs for about 40 minutes, but it passes very quickly in its gripping and engaging nature. Ben has a very strong command over the details and over the progression of events and the facts and the dates. So I'm going to be displaying this video. We're all going to watch it together. Take a moment to take it in and to remember, and to not only remember what we lost, but also appreciate what we have, our cherished survivors, our links to the past. And Ben is certainly representative of that. So we'll be displaying this video. Following the video, in about 40 minutes, I'm going to introduce and show another very short clip of about 5 minutes of some comments for us, special for us, that Ben had for us last night, recorded just last night for this particular group, for his fellow Atlantans. So without further ado, here is the video. If there are any questions or comments, please put it in the chat below. On the bottom of your screen, there's a button that you can click that says chat, and you can send some comments to me even as the video is playing, and I'll be able to see it and field any concerns or questions. So without further ado, here is the video. Give me 1 minute as I call it on the screen. Just one more note before I play the video. It not only features Ben, but actually the person who is interviewing Ben or presenting this back in 2013 is our very own Beth Jacob member, Mark Brooks, who is best known for his very bold voice. He was known as the voice of Beth Jacob for many years. His voice, I think, still features on our phone system when you call in the show, and it's significant that we have not only Ben but Mark presenting to us. So the first just 2 minutes is Mark presenting, and then comes Ben's story.
Before the outbreak of 1939,
when he was liberated, elections, starvation, one. When he was in Warsaw again, money. The Holocaust is the most documented event in human history. Ben Hiller knows. Ben Hiller is a rare survivor of the Holocaust. He was in the Warsaw Ghetto for 11 months. He survived the bestiality of 3 slave labor camps. He rode in packed cattle cars, withstood countless selections, starvation, and freezing temperatures. And 4 years later, when he was liberated, he returned home to what once was a city of 6,000 Jews and found himself one of just 17 still alive, the only one left of his family. Hear his story and be amazed that he is here to tell it. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Benjamin Hiller.
My name is Ben Hiller. I was born in a city called Groyec, near Warsaw, between Warsaw and Radom. Before the outbreak of 1939, Germany and Russia made a secret pact in the early year of 1939. And they developed a scheme to conquer Poland and divide it in half. And that's what Germany did, including Russia. September 1st, 1939, the Nazis invaded Poland. And they arrived in Poland with tanks, with automobiles, with motorcycles, and all kinds of motorized equipment. And the Polish armies defended their country with cavalry. No wonder that the Germans were able to conquer Poland within a few weeks. And after they arrived in our city, the first thing they did, they have arrested 7 Jews. And one of them was my brother. And my parents sent delegates, representatives of the Jewish people, and willing to give anything just to let my brother go. Unfortunately, they didn't listen to us. Within a few weeks, they killed all these 7 Jews. And from then on, sadness and crying appeared in our house without interruption. But I'd like to go back for a minute to the city where I lived. In that city, 90% of our customers were Christians. We manufactured leather goods, and that leather goods was converted into shoes. Our relationship with those people was wonderful. Of course, they depended upon us to give them credit, which we did. And every Sunday they came to us and pay up whatever they could. They worked very hard, long hours every day. And 2 days of the week, they went to flea markets to sell their shoes. And really, they depended upon us for their income, and we were willing to help them all the time. And we had wonderful relationships with them, and especially one Christian who was well-to-do, and he was a great customer of ours. I'm mentioning this here because it will later on play an important role in my survival. So after the Germans came into our city, and they took our brother, and they killed him, and sadness and tragedy started in our house. And after a few months working on the roads every day, especially in the fall, the roads were snowed up, and they made us come to the streets I worked there from sunrise to sunset, and no food, and no support. Shovels we had to support, to give our own shovels, and they should catch one person standing and not working with a shovel, God forbid. His suffering, his beating, getting the beating from these SS people was unlimited. So naturally we were very careful and not to stand still unless they were not around. So our lives became miserable. And one day, German authorities told us, we're going to move you the following day to a ghetto where Jews will be only there. And that's what we did. We had no alternative. We left our possessions, which we accumulated over the many years, and nothing taking with us, all the furniture, all the merchandise, all the goods, and all of a sudden we became homeless and no way of survival. Finally, a few days later, they told us, we're going to take you to Warsaw Ghetto. I want you to be ready the following day, and they take only the most important possessions. So 24 hours later, we were standing on the street, and their trucks arrived without covers in the wintertime, and they made us get onto the trucks, not knowing where we're going to go, the ghetto. But our family was very fortunate of all the people, because I had an uncle living there, was a well-to-do person. He took us into his house, and we lived with him, and he treated us very nicely. But every day I had a job to do. I had to the bakery to pick up the ration, the bread. And what do I see on the streets? People, congested streets, because Hitler brought in all the Jews from occupied countries into the Warsaw Ghetto. Here, people were standing and begging. They were selling their own possessions, jewelry, shoes, anything, and clothing, whatever they had, just to have a few dollars and be able to buy food for their children. As I walked the streets, dead people on the pavements, wooden wagons with Jewish, one Jew in the front and one in the back, pulling the dead people away from these corners of the streets. And that's all what I've seen. These scenes every day has such a great effect on me. I was beginning to think that I may have to go back to our city to get some monies from our Christian shoemakers, because what I've seen on the streets and expensive bread, no matter how much money we had, at the rate we're going, we may be in the same boat as all the other poor people. And going this way every day, and these scenes in my mind continuously, I began to think to go back to our city and ask all these Christian customers to help us out and give us our monies that they owe us. So one day, I decided to do that. I walked out of the ghetto. I was fortunate to discover a little hole in a fence, and I walked out of the ghetto, and I walked to a streetcar, and I took a train going back to our city, and I was sitting there, and next to me, on the other side of the bench, German soldiers came in with their guns on their shoulders, and they sat down. And I took a paper, I covered my face, that no Christian should discover me and hand me over to the Germans, because German authorities were paying rewards to Polish people, whoever would point out a Jew to them. And actually my heart was beating, and I was afraid that one of the Christians may point me out to the Germans, and this would be the end of my life. So within an hour, we arrived at the railroad station, and so far I was very fortunate. And I lined up at the railroad station to get a ticket, and all the people there were looking at me because evidently they realized that I was Jewish, and what was I doing in this time of the country, in this place where it is really dangerous for a Jew to be there in the first place. But somehow nobody revealed to me, to the German authorities, and I was able to get a ticket back to my city. I got on the train, and I sat down there, and again, the Christians looked at me in bewilderment. What am I doing here, risking my life? But I didn't talk to anybody, and finally I arrived at the city where I lived, and I got off the train. Again, all the crowd was turning toward me, and thinking about my fate. But finally I decided not to go together with them toward our city. I will take side roads, so nobody will be pointing a finger at me, and that's what I did. I walked our city from the railroad, approximately maybe an hour. That's how far we were. At those times, railroad stations were not stopped in the cities, outside the city. Finally, I reached our city, and I decided to go to see the most important customer with whom we had such wonderful relations, and who owed us a lot of money. And he knew me since I was born. And I arrived at his house. He greeted me with a strange look, as if he never knew me. And then he said to me, "I'll let you sleep here on the floor, and in the morning, you get up, you leave my house. If not, I'm going to report you to the German authorities." I could not believe this person who knew me since I was born, with whom we had such wonderful relations, could speak to me in this fashion. And I was just overwhelmed with sadness and thinking, what am I going to do now if I get such care and didn't care about my welfare at all. If he could have talked to me in this fashion, what could I expect from other customers who didn't have such kind of relations with me, with our family rather? Then I began to think, I have no choice. I'm not going to risk my life now crossing all kinds of streets there and in great danger. I decided to go to a city south of our city, was called Bialobrzegi. I was never there, but I still heard they still have there a ghetto which is still not confiscated or sent the people away. So I realized I cannot walk on the highway because the Germans were traveling there continuously with their tanks, with their trucks, with their motorcycles, all kinds of equipment. And I decided to walk deep in the woods, snow going up to my knees, and I had no choice but to do it in this fashion to be able to survive this trip. So I walked all day until I arrived in that city, Bialobrzegi, and I managed to find the ghetto. And I came to the ghetto, and I told the Jewish people, I just walked all day, would you please help me? They did help me. They gave me a room and board, and they gave me food, but they realized that I was very sick. They called a doctor, and the doctor examined me, he said that we have to rush him, this boy, to the hospital because he may have pneumonia and it will endanger his health. So they rented a Red Cross ambulance, and they brought me to Radom, a city south of Białobrzegi, an industrial city, and there they brought me to a hospital, and they discovered that I was very sick, had high fever, and they put me in the hospital, and I stayed there over 2 weeks. In those times, pneumonia, it was considered a very serious illness. Finally, after recuperated, as they let me go free, I decided to go to a city, Szydłowiec. Szydłowiec was a tannery city, basically. And the reason I went there is because my family had their a representative of ours, and we sent our hides to the tannery to convert them into leather goods. So naturally, this salesman of ours knew me already well, and he treated me like his own child. So every day I walked the streets. I really didn't know what to do in those times. So finally one day, as I was walking to one of the streets, a German truck pulled up in front of me, and jumped out German soldiers with their guns pointing at me and approaching me and asking me, "Are you Jewish?" I said, "Yes." "Have you got papers?" I said, "I have no papers." So they made me go onto the truck, and this was the end of my liberty. And from there on, I was handled by the Germans, and they took me to a slave labor camp. Actually, this was a munitions factory, and they put me to this labor camp, and they gave me a pajama and wooden shoes, and this was my clothing. And in this particular plant, the Poles were manufacturing missiles, and when they owned these factories, they supplied each worker with gas mask in order not to breathe in the poison. But the Germans took away all these masks, and they made us work without masks, and they put me into a wooden hut, 3 bunks high. I slept on top, and no mattress, no cushion, no covers. That's how you slept each night, and you survived all these circumstances. And whatever you touched was yellow. Your fingers, your body, your face. And when they gave you this a little portion of soup or a piece of bread, and you touched it, it became yellow. And this was all poisonous. So working every day like this with no hope. So the Germans realized that some of us became sickly. So every morning, every couple of days rather, they came, an officer came, white gloves in one, and a whip in the other hand, and looking you in the eyes with his flashlight. If you look sickly, they took you out, and this was the end of you. And this was going on every few days. You can imagine now. It's difficult for any human being now to conceive, to just understand this, how standing there in line and not knowing whether wouldn't be taken away. Your heart was pounding and thinking, God, be God, please help me out. And somehow I survived all these selections, because my determination was, no matter what, I want to survive. I want to live. I want to tell the world what they're doing to us. So this was going on every few days. But in the meantime, the Germans did break the agreement they had with Russia, and they invaded Russia full force, and every day the German soldiers came over. We are going forward. We're going to be in Russia very soon. And every time they came over and told us this, our hearts were sad and not knowing whether we will survive. But I did not give up hope. I knew that one day God will turn to us and help us out. In the meantime, the suffering and the selections and bitterness and constantly hungry, we continued until one day the Germans already stood near Moscow. They almost were able to succeed to take over Russia completely. But thank God that one day they were at Stalingrad. I'm sure history will tell you this, the greatest battle of all. And there came the turning point. The Russians were able to turn away the German forces, and as a result, the Germans they lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers at that time. They began to pull out of all the territories little by little from Russia, because they themselves were get stuck in the frozen weather. Their tanks were immobile, and Hitler sent them to Russia without the proper clothing, and he thought he was going to take over by October, but it turned out differently, and the Germans saw a great percentage of them froze to death, and this was, as I said before, it was the turning point of this war between Russia and Germany. And little by little, they pushed them back. They pushed back the Russians, the Germans, until they reached Poland. In Poland, they were again being harassed and almost defeated by the Russians and the German and the Polish armies. But somehow it didn't work out like this. That in the meantime, the Germans lost all these territories and all these foods that they were getting from the Russian soil. But now we were suffering there because they reduced our rations, because they themselves got less. And one day we decided to complain, and we all complained, and they forced us to form as a white circle, standing like this 24 hours a day, for 24 hours, and punish us for this. And they were walking around with German shepherds and making sure that nobody escapes. Of course, this was impossible. Nobody in his right mind would try to attempt, especially in Germany, attempt to walk away from the job. But they wanted to show us if we will try to complain again, this will happen to us. And in Germany, we struggled every day. It was today a month, and we didn't know when the end will come. But I forgot a very important scene that I would like to go back and remind you what happened, especially as Gazas could come in there. They were able, the Germans were able to capture one of us prisoners who attempted to escape. And what they did, they hung him on top of the entrance, and the scene we have seen day in the morning when we went to work, and at night when we came home, and this body was hanging for weeks. But one day they took him off, but they're just pointing out to you how barbaric, how tyrannical they became. They didn't care about any human being. So in Germany, as I mentioned before, they made us stand in a circle because we complained we don't get enough food. But since then, we did not complain. But one day, just to remind you of a scene that I observed every day. Every day during lunchtime, when they gave us the lunch food, and after the large kettles were emptied, some of us ran toward these kettles inside and licking the side walls. That's how hungry we were. And the Germans outside looking at our scene, and they were happy and smiling. And this tells you what barbarism was in their bodies. Now, while during this conflict between Germany and the Allies, but as you know from history, the Allies were finally the kings over the air. They were able to travel all over Germany with their planes and do harm to the Germans' manufacturing facilities. But one day, they came to our factory in the middle of the night, and they bombed it, and they leveled it to the ground, and the flames were flying, going up in the sky very high, and the panic, and we didn't know where to run, so what place to find our safety. But somehow I managed to just know exactly where our infirmary was. So I actually ran towards the infirmary, and thank God I wasn't. Nothing was hurt in my body. But I ran towards the infirmary, and I came to the infirmary, and I complained to the doctor, and he examined me. He found me to be okay, so I was very happy. So after this leveling of the factory, the Germans decided to rebuild this factory rapidly. So they began to make us run with steel bars on our shoulders, 10 guys carrying a steel bar, and they're running with us with a whip. If we didn't run, we were hit. And this was going on until this factory was built within a few weeks, and they began to produce again their missiles. But one day, they realized they're not going to be able to exist anymore, and the whole world knows already what they're doing to these prisoners. They decided to send us out of this factory and send us to Dresdenstadt. They took us on a train and traveling for weeks, and every time they heard the planes coming, they stopped traveling until one day they reached Dresdenstadt, and finally they told us that we can get out of the trains, and they'll send us to one of the places there for us to stay. But as we tried to get off the trains, none of us could walk, and they had to get Red Cross people, one on each side, to help us walk to these places which they designated. So finally, we arrived there, and this was like a new world to me, and overjoyed that one day it seemed to be like one day we'll be liberated, because the world already knows what they will do to us. But one day we didn't see the German soldiers anymore, so we realized that this was the end of them, and we were liberated at that time by the Russian army, and the happiness and the joy is indescribable. And then most of those Russian prisoners in that camp, they ran out onto the highway, running into German homes, and somehow they had the nerve to kill women and children, and just take whatever they wanted. But us Jews could not do anything like that, and we waited one day to be completely free, and we were liberated May 10th, 1945. Now, but I knew after we were liberated that all my family somehow was destroyed by the Germans, and none of them survived. But I decided to go back to my city, when I knew in my heart nobody survived and nobody's there. But I wanted to go just to take a look for myself, if this is true, if there's any possibility, any hope for me to stay there and to grow and become a prospective and a successful person, whatever I attempted to do. But when I came to our city, we had 17 people that survived, and nobody, that was all out of 6,000 Jewish people. But I stayed there a couple of weeks, and I realized there was no future for me there, no hope to do anything. So I decided to go back to West Germany. As you all know from history, Germany was divided into 4 zones: American, Russian, and French, and British. So I went, of course, to the American zone, because I knew the American zone is the best for me to be. I finally arrived at the American zone. Again, I forgot an important point, but I would like to, please forgive me, I'm a little excited. I am not by profession a speaker, so try to recollect this important scene.
The Russian officer?
Yeah. When I arrived, thank you. When I arrived on the border of Poland and Germany, at that time already Russia was having this particular zone in their hands. But we came to the German and the Polish border. So the Russian soldiers came up with their machine gun, with their guns on their shoulders, and asked for every person a document if you have a permit to go to Germany. And when they approached me, unfortunately, I did not have a document. Where would I get a document? The Polish people are not going to give me, especially the authorities, not to go back to Germany without any reason. So the Russian soldiers took me off the train and took me to an office, and there was a Russian officer sitting behind a desk. and he said to me, "We fought for you, we bled for you, we liberated for you. Why are you going to Germany to do some dirty business?" I said, "No, I am not going to Germany for this purpose. I have a sister in a hospital there in West Berlin. I'm going to visit her." I had to act very fast and come up with some idea. He said, "No, I don't believe you. When you get out of here, take the train back to Poland. That's where you belong." When I heard this, I was really frightened. I said to myself, if I attempt to go on a train and they capture me, I'll be living now in Siberia. So I said to myself, I must attempt to do that. I have no alternative. Where am I going to go to in Poland? So I was standing on the platform, and as I noticed the train began to pull out slowly, and I looked at the Russian soldiers were going the opposite side. I immediately jumped onto the train. I figured I'm going to take a chance. The train was full of refugees, and I got inside there very deep, and I was praying to God, and somehow the Russian soldiers did not observe me, and that's how I made it to West Berlin. So to go back to West Berlin, and stayed in the American zone for a few weeks, and they released me because I had a relative of mine in Paterson, New Jersey, and whom I had never seen. He arrived in this country in 1907. So I traveled to West Berlin. I'm a little confused. I was released, and I was sent. I had to wait 2 years until I got permission to go to America. But I waited until I was given permission to go to America. So I traveled. I went to America by boat, and my joy and my happiness was overwhelming. And I finally thought to myself, now I'm going to have a future now. I'll live in a peaceful country, and I'll have everything I want. So after going by boat for 2 weeks, I arrived in New York City, and I saw this beautiful, the skyline and the beautiful city, and I was over there with joy when I met my uncle who came to pick me up, and he came to the port of New York, and he took me to his home in Paterson, New Jersey, and there I stayed with him a few months, and he made me. I started to work in a factory temporarily to make textiles. I stayed there for a couple of months, and then I got a letter from Uncle Sam that I am being drafted into the American Army because at that time the tension between America and Russia was extreme, and the President Truman was afraid that a war may break out, and then so he drafted people from 18 to 35. So I came to the local board. I said, my name is so and so. I just arrived in this country. I don't know. I haven't enjoyed the liberty yet, and I wouldn't want to go to the army. So he took out a military manual and looked at it and said, if you refuse to serve our country, you will never become an American citizen. So I went home and I discussed this with my uncle. I said, what am I going to do now? I'll be working in this country, and I wouldn't have all the privileges as any American. So he said, the best thing is you have to go. So I decided to join the American Army. So after basic training, which we had in Fort Dix, which was very rough, crawling on the floor, on the ground with a gun in your hand. So it was so simple for a young boy like me who never had a gun in his hand. So after basic training, I was sent to Fort Bliss, and there they realized that I should be there working in an office. I worked in an office, and then just give you an example how I loved it. I didn't go out from the camp, and when the guys got paid 2 weeks after every week, and after 2 weeks they got paid, and then when they went to the city, to El Paso, Texas, they came back without money. So after they were broke, they came to me, and I gladly loaned them monies. So I became very friendly with them. But to get back to the main story is after going back to Washington, D.C., because the tension was great between Russia and America. And one day, the Pentagon gave instructions that 65% of the soldiers will go to Korea. And of course, I knew about it. Of course, I worked in the office. And somehow, God watched over me. I didn't go to Korea. I was sent to England. Now I'm in England and still concerned about the tension between Russia and America. But somehow things were improving, and the relations became a little better. So they released us, and I was sent home and to New York. I didn't go to my uncle. I sailed to New York, and there I worked very hard. I worked at night. I went at night to school for years, but in 1956 I got married, and now I am proud of what I have accomplished. I have 15 grandchildren and 19 grandchildren, and 4 more, thank God, are coming to soon. So I wish those that are here and are very young, who want to accomplish, want to become something, I'm an example. You got to work hard, you got to learn, and you'll achieve your desire. And that's the end of my story.
What an incredible story. I know that many of you who are signed on tonight probably know Ben, know Mr. Hiller well. And even if you've heard bits and pieces, it's amazing to hear the whole story from him directly. You know, it's said that the great Satmar Rebbe of Yol Teitelbaum, Zatzal, of blessed memory, it's told that he used to say that when you find when you come across a survivor who stayed strong in their faith, certainly that is a person from whom you should seek a bracha, from whom you should seek a blessing. And it truly is a blessing to have Ben in our midst and to be able to hear from him of his tale of hashgacha, of divine providence, and not just of his amazing story through the war, but even to hear little bits and pieces about what it was like before the war. And that's a bracha that we don't take for granted. An additional piece of tonight's presentation is a very short clip. The original idea was to play that video because it was done well and the story was unfolded and presented very well a bunch of years ago. But it is significant to keep in mind that that is a big stage, but Ben is also on the stage of our Beth Jacob community. It's a privilege to have him with us. And so I tried to conduct an interview due to COVID and due to the fact that the Hillers are currently on their way out of town, wasn't able to do it in person. And so we tried to do our best over Zoom, got a couple of minutes. And I guess the most significant portion of it is just to a way of connecting to the present then. So I'm going to play that for just a couple of minutes. Let me just tell you what we're going to talk about. It's literally 5 minutes. I asked him several questions about the story. He really wanted to have the time and the opportunity to tell it again and to go over the details and make sure it was all refined. That was one thing that came out in this brief little snippet, was that he's always looking for the next step. This is now 8 years later, almost 8 years after he told that story, and he's still looking for ways of communicating it to the next generation. So that's one major lesson that I got from him, both from the video that we just heard, just witnessed together, and also from the little conversation I had last night, is the fortitude to keep on going, to always keep moving, always keep accomplishing. So I asked him some brief questions. His son, Rabbi Moshe Hiller, was there in the supporting role, repeating questions as was necessary. The connection wasn't great. So you'll see some of the questions, some of the answers. We're talking about how he ended up in Atlanta, something for us local folk, and a message for the next generation. And finally, one thing that was not featured in that video from the Bremen is something that we know about, that we as Ben's friends, family, and community members, admirers, know about his sense of humor. And that comes out in just the last minute of this short snippet. So I'll play that for you. Just one moment.
And from there,
did you think that you were going to survive everything?
I survived every day. I was praying to God. I want to live and so forth. And it wasn't so simple to say to God, I'm going to try to live and do the best I can about this.
Yeah. Okay. 1 second. He's got another question.
How did you end up in Atlanta? We're so privileged to have you in the community.
How did I manage?
How did you end up in Atlanta?
Well, I managed to come to Atlanta because my son, who was here sitting next to me, he after I got married and after the war, I have two sons, rabbis. My present son, Moshe. The other one is also a rabbi. So that's what I had. 2 sons, and God gave me the privilege to have 50 grandchildren.
Wow.
And after that, I have now, after great-grandchildren, over 50, close to 70. Great 15 grandchildren and over 50 great-grandchildren.
Wow.
And they're coming along every year, a few of them. And God gives me life here. And I'm thankful. I'm thankful to Hashem, actually, that I survived and I'm here, and I'm physically able to continue my affairs here.
So we as a community, we are so thankful to have you here in our shul, in our community. I'm going to ask one last question because I know that it's late and hard to communicate this way. but there are going to be, Beth Jacob is going to be watching your story tomorrow night. I want to know, do you have any message, any idea, anything you want to tell the community?
If you want to know about, if I remember.
No, he wants to know what would you like to tell the people of the Shul of Beth Jacob? What would you like to tell them?
I hope I remind, indirectly I remind the rest of the present generation of Jews that they're coming along in a wonderful time. God gives them a wonderful life, and I am so entangled in these problems. If I'm reminded about this, it's difficult for me to do this here in 10 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever. This will take me a long time to write everything down. Oh, but I should keep, I have a notebooks that I did at the beginning of this liberation there. I wrote up, I think I remember 15 pages at that time.
Wow.
And describing my experiences. I know I have it here somewhere, but this is something that the present generation, it's difficult for them to think about these things that I'm thinking about quite often.
And the
But I would like to remain as it is. They give me a chance. And when I come back from Lakewood, I will gather all my thoughts, and I have to sit down and write down all the other things here in detail. That would be much better.
Okay, good.
Right now is
good. Okay, Shane.
Very good. Thank you so much. Yasher Koyach. Thank you.
Okay. Shkoyach, thank you.
You know, you look good. Look, this guy looks good. No,
my father says you look good.
In my position now, in the amount of food I eat, look at this. I still have a full face here. I'm very grateful to God. That's
good.
And I'm survival.
Okay. Cool.
Okay, there you have it. That last line was Mr. Hiller was noting how good the screen looked, and I thought he was talking about me, but he wasn't. He was talking about himself, and that what a great way to end a happy note of a very difficult story, and that positivity, that humor is really infectious, and so on that note. Even though it is the eve of Asar B'Teves, it's a time that it's important to recognize the somber nature of the day and to recognize that there is something significant we have lost recently and also throughout our history. It's also important to Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha, continue to serve God with joy. And so may we take these important mixed messages tonight and go on together as a community with strength, remembering the past and looking forward to a bright future. Thank you very much for joining, and I look forward to finding more occasions to speak together.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Toda rabba, rabba.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have an easy fast.
Thank
wonderful
you.
Shabbos.
Thank you.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Hello.
Shabbat shalom. Have an easy.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbos.
Shabbat shalom. Jack Schenk here. I enjoyed hearing from Rabbi, Mr. Hiller. He's a great man and went through a lot of life and activity, and we thank Hashem for that.
Indeed, Jack, and we thank Hashem for